everyone is looking for liquidity. Everyone is trying to get inbound. They're trying to swap. They're trying to do all these things to make sure their experience is good. We actually work really closely with the Spiral engineers because we're using LDK at C equals. We're all collaborating on an API to let people buy liquidity off our LSPs and have them only have to integrate one API to be able to talk to a lot of LSPs. Zaps on Nostr are absolutely wild. The ability to incentivize content that you like by just sending not even a very tiny sliver of a penny, basically, but the reaction that can get out of people and the way you can really connect there is really cool. Lightning is all about peer-to-peer connections. And for us with C equals, we're being we're only connecting to people we want to connect to. I think Block really bought that Bitcoin for the future and thinking, hey, someday we might want to do something with this. And this is kind of exactly that. By putting our Bitcoin into channels on the Lightning Network and offering services and tools for people to use it, we're putting our Bitcoin to use, and we're actually hoping to generate some revenue off it.
Nick Slaney is the lead at C equals, which is the name of Block's new Lightning service provider subsidiary. In our conversation, we got into the reason that Block set out to build a Lightning service provider in the first place, the ways in which C equals will interact with other subsidiaries and entities under the Block umbrella, and we also got into the path towards global Lightning adoption. If you enjoyed this episode and if you learned something new, the best way you can show your support is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any podcasting 2.0 app to send in sats. There are dozens of them out there, but my favorite one to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Nick, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to cover the latest project you've released or announced just recently, C equals, all the work you're doing at Block, and excited for a discussion about Lightning more broadly. But before we do any of that, why don't we give listeners a little bit of a personal background, tell them about your personal history, how you discovered the Lightning Network, and why you decided to work at Block.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here. My story with Bitcoin starts back in 2013. I was in college and I had just discovered Bitcoin, and I actually went on localbitcoins.com and bought some Bitcoin from a guy in my local college library. So from there, I was kind of hooked on Bitcoin. When I graduated college, I graduated as a mechanical engineer and spent a lot of time doing hardware product design. Bounced around to a couple companies, but as long as I've been a mechanical engineer, I've always been in Bitcoin. I've always been running nodes, running miners, and more recently getting on the Lightning Network. Actually, a few years ago, I was looking for my next job, and one of my Bitcoin friends, James O'Bairn, actually said, "Hey, Nick, you should check out Square. They're doing some cool stuff over there." And I think he had actually gone to a little talk they had at Square before. It was around like 2017, 2018, where they were just starting to talk about looking into Bitcoin. And I think he kind of saw that there. And I went for it. I started Square as just a mechanical engineer doing what I had done in my career, working on hardware. But eventually that went really well. And eventually Jack announced that he was going to build a hardware wallet. So you could imagine it was kind of the perfect fusion of my main career and my side hobby almost. And I jumped for it and I tried to get on that team as quickly as I could. And by some miracle, I was able to get on that team, and I helped design and prototype the first round of hardware there. But this was around the time that I was also getting into Lightning. And I was on PlebNet. I was running a Lightning node. I was trying to just get as much liquidity in my node as possible, trying to route. And that's when I started reading about how non-custodial wallets get on the Lightning Network, and Breeze, Phoenix, all of these different things, and I kind of saw the opportunity of an LSP. So from my wallet position, I started going around the company telling people, hey, this is really exciting. This could be a really big opportunity. And that's how we got to C equals.
Very
So
cool.
from there, we did our launch actually a week ago. We got our node on the network, and it's been a dream. It's been awesome.
What was the first moment that compelled you to take a look at Lightning? Like when you were first learning about it, what was interesting to you about it at the time?
So I was on Bitcoin Twitter. I've been on Bitcoin Twitter forever, and I was seeing people talking about hashtag reckless, talking about the Lightning Network, and talking about actually running on mainnet back in 2018. And I had booted up a node way back then in 2018 just to kind of see what it was about. Didn't really understand it. I think I left some amount of Bitcoin on that node, like letting it go down. But when Plebnet came around and when people started using umbrals and things started getting a little easier to use, I decided to take a dive back into it and ran a node at a more serious level. I had a little more Bitcoin. I wasn't using Umbrel. I was using like LND and being a little more particular about it. But I started opening channels and using like Lightning Network Plus and Amboss and all these things, and saw that hey, there's a whole network here. There's so much going on. So it really kind of caught my eye, and I put in the time to really deeply understand what was going on. It's definitely it's a lot to take in. And Kevin, I think you deserve some credit. You're doing all of these podcasts, and you are definitely you're here. You can tell when you talk to someone who knows a bit about Lightning. You can tell whether they understand it deeply or not. But it takes some time. But by the time I kind of went in, ran the node, and was really on the network, I was hooked.
Yeah. Now, those problems that you must have seen problems in the early days of running a node and trying to figure out how to get liquidity, how to manage it, how to process payments. What are those problems similar to the problems that you're trying to solve today with C equals? What's the overlap there like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're running a node and you're just a small fry trying to get your node on the network, the first thing you do is you open some channels and then you're excited. And then you try to receive your first payment and you wonder why it doesn't go through. And after some study and some digging, you realize, oh, hey, I have to either send some payments first and swap out, or I have to convince someone to open a channel to me. And then you go on your next journey of maybe you go to LN plus, or you ask someone who's also trying to do it to open a channel towards you. And just um, the sense you have to build around liquidity is something that's not very obvious, and something that at C equals we're trying to make a lot easier for people.
Makes sense. So let's just make sure everyone has a understanding of what C equals is and where it fits in the block stack. I know there's a lot of businesses and business little components within blocks overall business. Can you break that down for everyone? What is C equals and where does it fit within the overall block ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So at C equals, we're focusing on building a Lightning service provider or an LSP. And a lot of what we deal with is liquidity, opening channels, making sure that our partners are able to send and receive payments. So you don't have to be a plebnet level expert to be able to make your node run well. C equals is a sub business within TBD. C equals is we're mostly focused on Lightning. The the mission for TBD is to focus on building tools and services and platforms for developers to take advantage of the new decentralized web. So within TBD, they're working on decentralized identity, they're working on verifiable credentials, decentralized web nodes. They're all tools for other people to use. And the thought is by helping to bolster this ecosystem, we can be a part of the new way to use the internet, something that Bitcoin has started and other sorts of services are starting to bring out.
Mm-hmm.
At, at Block in general, the business units are really divided up by the customers they serve. So Square is very focused on small businesses and merchants, people who are taking credit card payments and running businesses. Tidal is focused on artists, it's focused on musicians, people who are trying to become successful in their music careers. Cash App is focused on consumers. So Cash App is a consumer-facing app. People use it for banking, people use it for Bitcoin, etc. And yeah, that's kind of each business unit has their own customer they're trying to serve, and that's kind of how it's split up.
Right. And so specifically on the Bitcoin related businesses, so I'm thinking like Cash App and Spiral and TBD and now C equals being under the TBD umbrella. What's the rationale for splitting that up? Because it feels like there might be some synergies if they're all kind of you're all using Bitcoin in some capacity, maybe working together would offer some benefits. What was the reasoning behind splitting the Bitcoin businesses into different kind of categories?
Yeah, well, Spiral is split out into its own business because it's a nonprofit. All of the Spiral engineers, they are not necessarily working for Block, they're kind of working for the open source community and doing that by developing LDK. We actually work really closely with the Spiral engineers because we're using LDK at C equals. So we spend a lot of time with them just going through the code. We actually have a couple pull requests that have now made it to the Rust Lightning repo, which is kind of exciting. But the other Bitcoin businesses, we're part of TBD. TBD, I feel like the decentralized web, if you're interested in the type of things that Web 5 offers, you're probably pretty interested in Lightning eventually too. And we're not necessarily saying, hey, this links into this and this goes to that and this does that right now. But I could imagine in the future we could start connecting things a bit more.
Do you think we'll see other tech companies take a similar approach to what Block has done in the last couple of years, where you now split up into like cohorts, your businesses based on like who they're targeting and the role they play? Like a lot of the companies that are publicly traded, large financial institutions and tech companies, they're all under one umbrella. Is that, do you view that as a disadvantage to be all under one umbrella now? Like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how your views of the structure of the organization have evolved over time, because you were there before the split it happened, before it was when it was still called Square, right? And now it's Block with a number of businesses underneath. So is there an advantage? Like when you look back now, you think to yourself, like, how should companies be structured? Does the current system of that Block has set up make more sense? And do you think that can be extrapolated to other companies?
I don't know if I can speak on exactly how other companies should be structured, but I think something that I appreciate about Block is I think when people look at a company, they look at the CEO and they say, oh, he's calling the shots or she's calling the shots. She's saying everything should be a certain way. But at Block and even at Square before it became Block, everything was a lot more bottoms up. And there was definitely a big focus on who the customer is and making sure we are serving our customers well. But a lot of decisions were made at lower levels with, the people at higher levels, kind of just empowering the people who are really close to the work to make those decisions. When Square split into Block, it kind of, I think what Jack talked about a lot was a ecosystem of startups. And that's kind of, I wouldn't call them all startups now. I think Cash is now a pretty big business, and Tidal is too. But I think it's kind of a realization that, hey, a big company, not all big companies can do things that startups can do. And if we're able to provide a little separation and empower new businesses to move fast on what they need to do, I think that can be really beneficial. And I think that's proven out with TBD and C equals most recently.
Yeah. Can you speak to any of the maybe improvements or innovations you guys have been able to come up with that you wouldn't have been able to do in a traditional corporate structure? Like, what are examples of things that are enabled by this like startup ecosystem that wouldn't have happened, or maybe would have happened much slower at a single siloed company?
I think the big thing is you're able to run your kind of new initiative as a startup within the company. So you don't necessarily, we have a lot of existing infrastructure and architecture from Square that serves Square really well, but being able to not necessarily be bound by all those choices lets us be a little more scrappy and get things done a little quicker. Kind of that sort of thing where, a big company might have a lot of process and a lot of decisions that were made for maybe a previous line of work, and being able to start a new line of work where you're explicitly told, hey, you don't have to do exactly what was being done over there is really liberating. And that's to say also, I mean, we lean a lot on the existing block resources, and we have found ourselves saying, oh, do we want to use this? And then coming around and saying, oh, actually, this would be really nice to have this team help us out with this. So we kind of get the best of both worlds.
Nice. Now, let's get into C equals. And maybe a good starting point is just let's talk about the journey from this is an idea to now it's an announcement, it's out into the world. Can you talk to me about like the time from inception of this idea to the announcement last week? What happened in that time?
It took a decent amount of time. It was definitely a lot of time working with our cross-functional partners like legal, compliance, all of the finance people, treasury. And I think Block deserves a lot of credit because everyone, when I came to all these new people with this new idea, everyone was trying to figure out, okay, how do we make this happen? How do we make this work? And I think especially our compliance and legal departments deserve a special shout out because Lightning is so new. And like I said before, it's a lot to wrap your head around. It's a lot to understand. And I'm really proud to say that our cross-functional partners that I worked with to take this from just an idea to an actual business, they all understand it really well. It took a lot of time, but we're now at a point where I can talk to our lawyers or our compliance people and talk about channels and tiers and the Lightning Network and all of that, and they know what's going on. So it was a lot of education, a lot of telling people, hey, this is a good idea. I think this could be big. And having them be willing to listen and go along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to the difficulty of trying to grasp what's going on in the Lightning Network. That's why I started this podcast, and that's why it's still going on today. Is I'm still trying to understand it too. And you're right. There's so many new concepts here for people to understand, and it's a lot to take on for anyone, no matter what role you're in. I think as a developer and legal compliance across the board, it challenges a lot of assumptions, and it's new, it's technology, so. It's very cool to see this be built out, but now I'd love to hear more about how you see the opportunities of building a Lightning service provider at C equals. Why is this something that you guys want to focus on, especially with Block already having Cash App with a Lightning integration? I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh, look, there's a natural fit there. It makes sense. Cash App has a strong business. Why build out this separate, Lightning service provider business? What does that do that, Cash App does not do for you guys?
I think when you look at the LSP ecosystem right now, you see a lot of people who are making LSPs out of necessity. Like you see wallets that need an LSP because they're a non-custodial wallet, or someone's building an SDK and they need to bring an LSP just to make it so that people aren't having to rely on custodial services. So I think C equals is in this kind of new market where we're actually focusing on an LSP as a business and entirely on an LSP. I'd say, the reason why we ended up over in TBD was we could have just built a small LSP that would just serve us. But realizing that we could build an LSP that could serve a lot of people on the Lightning Network and kind of grow the pie there was something that made it a lot bigger than any specific product at Block, and something that we think, we're already starting to talk to partners that are outside of Block that will be bringing users that we would have never even thought to have started to do at Block ourselves. So I think that's kind of the big thing is by having it be a business where we focus on just doing the LSP part really well, we can serve not only potential interests inside Block, but also interests across the Lightning Network. And as the network grows and our partners do better and better, we do better.
Yeah. When did you realize, or what was the moment where you figured out that, some of these LSPs weren't trying to build just an LSP as a business, that they needed to build the LSP to build something else that they were trying to accomplish? Like, I'd love to hear more about why how you figured that out, and then stepping in as a dedicated LSP provider. Are some of these current LSP providers going to be, customers of C equals?
Yeah. I think the perfect example is the non-custodial wallet. Non-custodial Lightning wallets are very interesting because you're essentially enabling someone to run a really tiny Lightning node on their phone. It's like the coolest thing ever. When I first read about like what Breeze does and read that there was a little LND node in there, I couldn't believe it. And I had to download the app, and you can go into the settings section and you can see, oh, you can do all the LNCLI commands in there. Like, this is real. This is actually its own little node. And a big part of that, like letting someone run their own node on their phone, is great because they control all the keys. They are doing everything non-custodially. It's very much equivalent to a non-custodial Bitcoin wallet experience. But what you have to do is you have to take someone who is used to downloading an app and having it work and rectify that with all of the challenges of liquidity on the Lightning Network. So these non-custodial wallets like Phoenix and Breeze, they both have LSPs that those users can open a channel to. They don't know they're opening a channel in the background, but they actually open channels to those LSPs, and the LSP helps that user use Lightning without actually thinking about the channel and the underlying liquidity and all of that.
I
So
see.
that's kind of where the real need was. And when you look across the network, beyond wallets, everyone is looking for liquidity. Everyone is trying to get inbound. They're trying to swap. They're trying to do all of these things to make sure their experience is good. And really, the non-custodial wallet user is the most needy user. They're using a mobile app. They don't want to know about anything that's going on in the background. But those services you want to provide to them are actually useful for a business that's running BTC Pay Server and they just want to accept a bunch of payments, or a custodial wallet service or exchange even that has a certain transaction flow and they just need to have liquidity in the right place to make that happen. So it was really the realization that what you need to do for these very needy users, also you end up building services that are applicable to the rest of the network.
Mm-hmm. Now, I often hear the idea that liquidity on the Lightning Network is the scarce resource. Are there any good analogies that you like to use to think about, to help people understand what liquidity really means if they're not familiar with Lightning, if they're coming at it from the, internet or tech ecosystem, or not even, someone who's not even, familiar with Bitcoin? Like, how do you relate to someone who doesn't quite understand Lightning, and get them to understand the importance of liquidity on the Lightning Network? Because that's still something that even today I struggle explaining that to someone who's not, who doesn't run a node, who's not on the Lightning Network.
Absolutely. There's a lot, like, you need to really understand liquidity, you need to understand the Lightning Network and how it works. And then the next layer on top of that is how liquidity is moving around the network. I think the best analogy I've heard is really having people grasp that a Lightning channel is like an abacus. There's only so much Bitcoin in that channel. It can either be to one side or the other. And that, when you think about that building block and think about it across many channels, and you're trying to send payments across many channels, it kind of can help build the intuition, but it is kind of difficult.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into why this business, C equals, is important to Block as a company, right? Like, a Lightning service provider, I think for folks in the Lightning ecosystem, we understand the need for that. But, for Block being a, multi-billion-dollar business, I think a lot of people on the outside who may be following Block's business overall may be looking at this and go, what's the deal here? Why is a Lightning service provider, so high up on the priority list for you guys, considering all the other things that you could be working on and all the resources that you do have to build financial tools for the world?
Yeah. An LSP is really, and C equals is really a look towards the future. It's a look towards Lightning. And for Block, it's actually a way for us to invest our Bitcoin. Right now, we have about 8,000 Bitcoin. It's all It's all locked up, and it doesn't really do much. So I think people on the outside might have seen that as kind of a speculative investment, or saying like, "Oh, hey, this is for inflation," or whatever the current thing people say about holding Bitcoin is. But when I went to the treasury lead and I asked her, "Hey, I have an idea. It's going to take some Bitcoin. Is that okay?" I was kind of thinking, oh, she doesn't want to move it, like it's an investment, probably don't want to touch it. But what she actually said was, yeah, that's exactly what this is for. And that was a big thing for me, just kind of thinking about this, because yeah, I mean, I think Block really bought that Bitcoin for the future and thinking, hey, someday we might want to do something with this. And this is kind of exactly that. By putting our Bitcoin into channels on the Lightning Network and offering services and tools for people to use it, we're putting our Bitcoin to use, and we're actually hoping to generate some revenue off it.
That is interesting. So you think that was from day one, that was the plan with buying that Bitcoin? You think that at some point, someone at Block, maybe Jack or someone else, was thinking, eventually we're going to be using this and generating an actual return on it rather than just holding it for the price appreciation?
I mean, that's what I was told. I don't know exactly, but I don't know if they even thought that we'd be able to make money on it either. I think it was more like we believed in Bitcoin and we wanted to show that, and an opportunity to show that even further by using it to help people get on the network, I think is a story that people are pretty on board with.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so I have to then ask about frameworks for deploying this capital, this Bitcoin, on the Lightning Network. How do you guys think about this? You got 8,000 or so Bitcoin. What's your strategy? Do you just dump 8,000 Bitcoin onto the Lightning Network and double public capacity in a day, or how do you think about efficiently using this capital, helping the network, and helping this whole ecosystem grow?
So we're starting with what I'd call a modest investment of Bitcoin. We need to bootstrap our node. We need to get on the network. And that's what we're starting to do now. We had our launch. We're opening channels. We're doing that. Eventually, as we start rolling out our LSP services, I'm hoping that the more Bitcoin we add to the node, it all has a place to go. I guess I want to make sure that when we're opening channels, it is going to a non-custodial wallet user, or it is going to a business. It's going towards people who are actually going to be using the Lightning Network to send and receive Bitcoin. And I think we'll very easily be able to say in a little bit, when we actually start offering our services, we'll be able to say, hey, we have this many customers, we've had this much demand, we need this much more Bitcoin. I think the ideal future state is, as we're adding Bitcoin, it's going to people who need it.
Yeah. Now, what have you learned in the process of running your own node, actually, and then seeing Cash App and Spiral, like any of the learnings from node operations there that are now coming into the C equals ecosystem? What kind of information is being exchanged here between the different businesses about how to operate a successful node?
We're all using LDK, so we're talking about what's going on with that. The other thing that's really nice about Block that people might not know is Block is relentlessly transparent. Like when you join as a Block employee, you are inundated with emails from people you don't even know that are just updating you on what their team is doing. So I've been able to follow Cash App's deployment of Lightning. I've been able to talk to the Spiral team. The Spiral team is on Discord, so you can just see what they're up to all the time. And there's always information sharing going on there.
Nice. And so will we see any kind of like future collaborations with Cash App, with the hardware wallet business, with as it pertains to C equals, or is that still TBD?
I'd say it's still TBD. We're, of course, always talking and always looking for opportunities to connect. But for right now, we're definitely very focused on getting we have gotten the node out and focused on our services that could integrate someday.
Okay. And so now I know Spiral's working on LDK, but I want to hear more about, from a performance standpoint, what is the reason you guys are using LDK? What do you see in it, and what does Spiral see in it? Like, why LDK versus the other Lightning implementations?
So Spiral is focusing LDK on mobile users, which it kind of goes back to what I was saying about mobile wallet users originally. They're kind of the most needy users, and building for them, you gain a lot of knowledge about building for maybe easier use cases, like building for a server on AWS or something like that. LDK is in Rust, which is really performant. We like that. We also like that the Spiral team is pretty close. The Spiral team is reachable via Discord for pretty much everyone, but being at the same company kind of helps as well.
Yeah. Now, when you think about, actually, one other question on the implementation side, why, if LDK is focused on solving problems for mobile users, why is that not the focus for all the other implementations? Or, why the need to specifically call out, we need to help mobile users? Are other implementations not, is that not their priority as well?
I can't really speak on the other implementation's priorities, but I do think that LDK being very specific about mobile users is kind of unique in this space. And it's worth saying that, yes, supporting mobile users is probably one of their big priorities, but that rolls into a design architecture of a node that is very LDK just at its heart is very modular and very easy to kind of go into all the little details of what's going on with the node. So we're not using it for the mobile use case. Obviously, we're using our own server, but we have a lot of customizability in there, which is really useful for us.
Right, because of the modular architecture there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I want to ask more about the business side of C equals. I want to understand your best understanding of, like, where's the money to be made in managing liquidity on the Lightning Network. Like, how does this all unfold? And maybe you can speak to either C equals or Lightning service providers generally. Like, where are they going to be making money? Is it going to be money made from customers, consumers paying? Is it going to be made from enterprises? What does that landscape look like?
I can't say for sure exactly what it's going to look like. This is a super new market. I have some ideas. I think the beauty of Lightning is there are places where you can charge fees kind of everywhere. And there's a lot of different levers you can pull and a lot of different ways to do it. And even though we have an idea of what we're going to do, I could see us changing that in months after we launch our services and pivoting. But I think generally you can look at marketplaces are already out there for inbound, like Amboss's Magma is a really good place to go see. It's from what I've seen, it's a pretty liquid marketplace, and you can see like, oh hey, I can make this much money selling inbound, and see how that's happening in real time. That's a place I'm always looking. Also, just the other services that people offer on Lightning that involve moving liquidity around. There's always a fee to charge here or there. And just coming from my plebnet background, I think everyone on plebnet knows about routing fees. The interesting thing is for an LSP, I don't think we're necessarily trying to play the routing fee game. I think we're more trying to play the onboard people onto Lightning game, because those people are going to be people who are willing to pay to have a good experience. And I think that's what we want to provide for our customers.
I see. So more of like a white glove experience. Like, don't worry about it. We're just gonna slide you right into the Lightning Network. You don't have to manage your liquidity or anything. We'll take care of that, and maybe in the process be able to charge a higher fee rate than you would if you were, helping existing Lightning users route payments back and forth. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I see. And so maybe that's the reason we're seeing so many, new Lightning service providers pop up, is that we now realize that in onboarding of all these new people, if Bitcoin's going to become the money for the world, we have billions of people to onboard, and onboarding those people may have those higher margins. Is that the right idea?
I think that's the beauty of the LSP market in general, is that we are bringing people onto the Lightning Network. And that, I think, is a very valuable service. I think people would be willing. If you take someone who is used to taking credit card payments and they're used to paying X fee per transaction or paying for, setting up that service, those fees and margins are much higher than what's on the Lightning Network. And I think for those sorts of people, you can offer a better service that has a global reach for cheaper. And I think that's a big opportunity.
Have you talked to Square merchants about demand for Lightning in this process? I know you guys are, under the same corporate umbrella, but it just struck me now that, if you're speaking with Square merchants, maybe they're seeing, their fees rise. I know, I believe Stripe introduced an extra 1% or 1.5% international card fee. We're starting to see some some big opportunities to help merchants that are, selling things for $10 or less, maybe $20 or less. You get really fat fees there that are being eaten by Visa and MasterCard along the way. Is there some kind of use case there that you see, in the short term where C equals can help onboard Square merchants to the Lightning Network and help, earn money from their customers over Lightning rather than paying a 5 or 10% fee to process a small transaction?
I can't speak to what Square is doing and what they're thinking about Lightning. I know at C equals we are very bullish on Lightning. And I think that's one of the biggest things about an LSP actually is before any kind of non-custodial product, you would almost offer as kind of a charity. You'd say hey, here's a wallet that you can use for Bitcoin and, it's open source. It has to be open source anyway. With an LSP, we actually have a business incentive to help people get on the Lightning Network because we might be able to make a little money along the way. The incentives are aligned. So I think that's a huge opportunity, honestly. And I think it's a big step function in the way we think about Bitcoin and Lightning. I think it makes this game totally different. We're no longer just trying to get everyone onto a custodial platform. We're really trying to get people using Bitcoin the way it was really meant to be used originally.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. Now, because Lightning is an open network, and because getting onto the Lightning Network can be done through you guys or through a bunch of other Lightning service providers or independently, what does that change about the ways in which you approach building this business for customers when you now can't lock them in? There's no way to, it's not like, you onboard someone to Cash App and they're in the Cash App ecosystem and they're there, and there's a lot of friction required to move to another ecosystem. With Lightning, you have a bunch of providers and they're all kind of interchangeable. If I don't like the way one service provider is treating me, I can move to the next or the next. How does that change the way you think about building C equals?
I think it makes me think about building C equals in the same way that any business would think about building their business, because it really, I feel like most healthy businesses, you have customers that are able to switch off you. It promotes competition, which is good. And, it really makes me convicted on doing the things, knowing who our customers are and doing things to make sure that they have a great experience and they have a great experience with Lightning.
Yeah. So maybe then it's this kind of tech ecosystem that we've seen built up over the last decade or two. Do you think then that is kind of an exception to the rule where to some degree these companies have not necessarily had to always provide the best service to their customers because they can, with a network effect, they can kind of afford to, take extra fees or provide a subpar service because they know the customer can't leave? Is that Is that, you think that was kind of an exception in the last decade or so?
I guess it's a little different, and yeah, when you put it like that, I think it's a little bit like the way that maybe things we'd imagine things would be in a really decentralized web in the future.
Yeah, and because we're now seeing that as well with things like Nostr, we're now having like, oh, now there's a decentralized version of Twitter or Reddit or of any kind of other, company you can imagine doing social media. And now that same issue is coming up where now the companies are not, they don't have this lock in, they don't have this ability to, charge users more or give them a poor experience with a ton of ads, and now they have to kind of compete on the merits of their business, which I think is very cool.
I think it's really good.
I want to get into now the topic of, the Lightning ecosystem more broadly. I want to discuss competition and collaboration. This is something that I've just been as an observer. I've kind of watched enough of the companies being built in the Lightning space to see that, like, over the last year or two, it seems like in every single category of every app you can imagine being built on Lightning, there's now one or two companies that they're more or less happy to not compete with each other, grow the pie, just watch this Lightning ecosystem evolve, and know that down the road, a bigger pie is helpful for everyone, including their direct competitors. But now I'm starting to see, especially in the Lightning service provider business, a bunch of new competitors have come in recently. Like C equals, we have, I know Lightspark is working on something. I know MicroStrategy is working on some kind of enterprise related Lightning business. I don't quite know what that will be, but it seems like there's a bunch of companies now coming in, and I get the feeling that there's a bit of a shift happening here, and maybe there's a focus towards competition as well. Do you get the sense that that is happening in the Lightning ecosystem?
Not really, honestly. I think a good example of collaboration actually is the Open LSP spec group we're working on. It's me and John from Synonym. A few other LSPs are in there, and we're all collaborating on an API to let people buy liquidity off our LSPs and have them only have to integrate one API to be able to talk to a lot of LSPs. So I'd say we're still in that mindset of trying to grow the pie and trying to make this thing happen. Um, I don't really feel like we're really getting super cutthroat yet. I think there's still a lot to figure out. Like there's still a lot to figure out with the LSP model and how we're dealing with liquidity and who we're serving, how we're serving them, those kind of things.
Right. Tell me more about this Open LSP project. I'm interested in, why did this, how did this come to be, and why is this, a worthwhile goal for different LSPs to pursue together?
Yeah, I think it's just the realization that we all kind of want the same thing. We want LSPs as a business to be successful. We want wallets and businesses accepting Lightning payments to have easy ways to get liquidity. And instead of you coming to C equals and then going to another LSP and integrating their special API and doing all the special things, if we can all be interoperable, then exactly the vision we talked about before, where we're kind of competing on our merits as opposed to how difficult it is to integrate, becomes kind of the future.
I see. So would that mean that at any point a customer could kind of, it could choose the LSP that offers the lowest fees or the lowest kind of rates to, process their transaction or to do some action? They could now plug into this API and kind of talk to all of them.
I think that's the idea someday. I think at least you'll be able to switch easily. I don't know how soon you're going to have a wallet where you have a drop down box of LSPs, but at the very least, developers and people who are making Lightning services or Lightning businesses, they won't have a lot of trouble switching.
I see. Okay, so let's talk about the Lightning Network and talk about some of the adoption challenges that you're seeing. I'd love to learn more about now that you're so deep in the weeds in building an LSP and figuring out how to get more people on Lightning. What are the lessons? What is preventing people from using Lightning today?
I think what really prevents people from using Lightning is the UX. Ideally, no one knows what's going on with liquidity or anything like that. And a wallet is as easy as you install an app on your phone, you receive your first payment, and you go from there. That is kind of hard to do with Lightning, but I think there's a lot of good projects that are really focusing on UX and product as opposed to maybe trying to create a cool Lightning thing. LSPs, I think, have a big role to play there as well as we start to develop tools and services that let you manage your liquidity more easily, even to the point where you don't have to think about it at all as a wallet maker or a customer. I think that would really help there.
Are there any new kinds of customers that you're imagining that can be created when you have a lot of LSPs kind of working together, a thriving ecosystem? Who's an example of like a customer that could be onboarded onto Lightning, but to date has not been able to for whatever reason?
There are so many customers that can be onboarded to Lightning. I mean, it's kind of the same thing as Bitcoin. If someone's taking a payment or they're sending a payment, if they want it to be really cheap, if they want it to go pretty much anywhere in the globe, if they want it to be really fast, Lightning is the answer. So I think this ecosystem, if we can really nail the UX and the scaling, can it can be all across the world. It can be where anyone is taking a payment.
Right. I like that. Anywhere that there's a payment happening, you can use Lightning and you can
Exactly.
benefit from this LSP. Now, what about the places where payments are not happening yet because there has been no way for a payment to happen? Like I'd love to hear more about the use cases that you kind of see where there's an idea that could have worked if we had a tool for processing small payments before, but because we never did, the idea never saw the light of day. Like what are some of those new things that we might now see evolving because of the advent of Lightning?
Yeah, I think like I said, any payment anywhere is probably eventually, I hope, will be Lightning. But I think we actually are seeing some things right now that are already kind of showing us, hey, this can be a cool thing. A couple things I've been thinking of is value for value, where you're looking at Mash or a company like that, where you flip a page and maybe there's a wallet that spends a very, very tiny amount of Satoshis on your behalf. Paying content creators in that way is really cool. I also am a big fan of Nostr. And I don't know if you're on Nostr, Kevin. I think you might be.
Yeah.
But zaps on Nostr are absolutely wild. The ability to incentivize content that you like by just sending not even a very tiny sliver of a penny, basically, but the reaction that can get out of people and the way you can really connect there is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. It's really cool to see, and the metrics. I'm following some metrics on Nostr and just watching. I think there's upwards of 10,000 zaps per day now on Nostr, and these are just people
Yes.
paying each other for enjoying the content that they create, and it's very cool. And I could definitely see an economy forming around this where one never existed before. It's like all the creators who were trained to believe that their content was financially worthless are now going, oh wait, my content, my ideas are actually worth something. Even if I never, take advantage of those ideas, I never put them, I never exercise them myself. I can put those out into the world, and someone else is going to find it valuable, and that can now, give you a direct payment in return. It's very cool to see.
I love the idea that we could go on Twitter or Nostr and not see any ads, but still have people making money. And another thing I love about Nostr too is people will say, "Oh, I received a Zap, and then I sent that same payment out to someone else." That's a circular economy. Things
Right.
are happening right, like it's happening right there. So when you talk about the real ideal future of Lightning, it's really sending and receiving over the network. It's really cool to see a little microcosm of that happening today.
Mm-hmm. It is very cool. Now, one thing though that is going to change if Lightning evolves in the way I think it might, where we have tons of these payments flying around all the time, is now we have consumers inundated with payments coming in and out. And right now, at least today, it's a very manual process. You get notifications for every zap you get. You have like long lists of transactions that you don't have to deal with in the fiat world. You go to the grocery store, you pay your bill once, you might make 5 or 10 transactions in a given day, but on Lightning, I'm already seeing, I'm receiving, minute by minute boosts for the podcast, and I'm receiving zaps and things like that, and it's happening. I'm getting hundreds. I'm sure there's hundreds of payments happening every single day between the Nostr stuff, the podcast stuff, Stacker News, all sorts of Lightning apps. And I'm thinking now, how do we manage this? Do you guys have any sense for how consumers are gonna like work with the hundreds of payments that are coming in and out of their wallet on any given day if Lightning really gets to where we think it could go?
First of all, Kevin, I love that you have that problem that you're receiving too many zaps and boosts, and it's too much for you. That's a great problem to have, honestly.
Yeah, I can't. I have to scroll back. I scroll so far back, and I can only see like a day's worth of history. If I miss a payment, I have to scroll through like hundreds of single sat boosts on podcasting to see who sent me that 10,000 zap boost. It's kind of cool,
that.
but it is a problem. It still is something that has to be solved. It's a cool problem, but
I love that that's a problem. And I think what that really goes back to is really focusing on UX. And it's something I see a lot in Lightning and in Bitcoin in general is I feel like when new devs join, they want to be a Lightning engineer. They want to be a Bitcoin core dev. But I think the most meaty problems we have right now are really at the user interface level. It's really like, how do I get a user to have a good experience here? And it's a different problem, but I think it can be just as hard as, figuring out the latest bit for Bitcoin. And it's something that I think is underappreciated in the community. It's why I'm so excited for the hardware wallet project, actually. There's a lot of really smart people on that project, but there's also, I'd say, last time I checked, I think it's like maybe more than half of the people who are working on that have never even been in the Bitcoin ecosystem before, which is really cool because you get the outsider perspective and it lets you really look with without the Bitcoin eyeglasses at the problems you're trying to solve. I think that's really what's going to get us to the next level is starting to look at using Bitcoin and Lightning every day and bring in people who are not necessarily deep in the ecosystem to try to solve those problems.
Right. Can you speak to some of the design improvements that these kind of outsiders coming into Bitcoin are uncovering or solving for the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's really, it goes back to the way Block operates. We are always focused on the customer. And for the hardware wallet, they're really focusing on people who want to do self-custody. And so imagine being a person who is coming from not knowing Bitcoin at all, but interested, and they pick up a wallet and they want to send their first payment. That is such a crazy thing to navigate before you even talk about creating a Bitcoin transaction. There's so much you have to learn and figure out, and creating an app or an experience that lets you do that is really difficult. So the wallet team is sharing a lot of what they're doing on wallet.build, and I think more to come. But I'm really, it gives me a lot of hope to see their process and to see how relentlessly they're focusing on making a good experience for their customers.
Yeah, that's very cool. Excited to see what they roll out there as well. Okay, I want to talk a bit about payment reliability on Lightning, because this is a UX challenge that, going back a few years was very, very common that, when I first set up a node and I started playing around with payments, I'd almost expect them to fail. And I'm sure you felt the same way, even years before. And now it seems like most of those problems are being solved or have been handled to make Lightning at least, now the expectation is the payment goes through. Now the expectation is like 90+% of payments are successful. I believe River came out with a research report from their nodes in September or October of 2022, and they said 98.7% of their Lightning payments happening through their node were successful. what's your sense for like how to improve payment reliability on your side as an LSP? What can you guys do to make sure that number, whatever it is, 90, 95, 99%, gets to like Visa and MasterCard level?
I think a lot of it, well, first of all, I think just as the network grows and people open more channels and they're more picky about the channels they open, I think that's going to improve over time. Lightning right now, I think it's at like 55, 5,400 Bitcoin on the network. That's it's pretty small compared to the amount of payments that are sent over like a Visa or MasterCard. As an LSP, we really want to focus on how we're managing our liquidity. And I kind of hinted at before, it's not really like your routing node. You need to be thinking more about how your liquidity is moving across your node, what your liquidity ratio is across all of your channels. And it's almost like you need to protect your liquidity more than you're trying to offer it on the free market. So there are ways to do it, and I think it's something that's going to evolve over time. I think as we add more people to Lightning Network who are really there to be sending and receiving payments, we're going to see patterns and traffic shift, and it's something that is probably going to have to be actively managed, at least on our side.
I see. Now, do you have any sense for what kind of payments will be most common running through your LSP? Like, what are you anticipating? Are you anticipating larger payments, smaller payments? I know, again, referencing that River report from 2022, they said their average payment size, I believe, was $46 in Bitcoin. Uh, does that seem reasonable to you guys? Are you expecting that number to go up or down over time?
I think right now, especially, you're probably best off using Lightning for smaller payments, probably around there. There's a calculation you can do where you can find out, okay, given the average fees across the channels I want to send across, and even the liquidity that's probably in those channels, you can find a point where your payment is most likely going to go through, and also a point where it becomes cheaper just to send an on-chain payment. So I think the last time I went through that, it was maybe like $300 max you would want to be sending over the network in its current state. But as we are starting to add more liquidity to the network and open bigger channels and get smarter about where we're putting the liquidity, I think that number could grow over time. And that calculation where maybe you want to send an on-chain transaction to have the fees be cheaper, maybe you also want that payment to go through really fast. So I think that's only for cost sensitive people, but maybe there's some people who want to send a Bitcoin sized payment, have the finality of Bitcoin, but also have it go fast. And they might be willing to pay extra for that. So I can see the average price of a payment or the average value of payments going across LSPs and other nodes going up over time as usage goes up and as we get more liquidity on the network.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned getting smarter about managing liquidity. Do you have any frameworks you guys are using for opening channels and who you open channels to, and how you manage that liquidity?
I think right now we're definitely acting like a new node on the network. We're opening a lot of channels. We're trying to, we're looking at the graph and trying to put our channels in places where they'll be most effective for our future users. But it's really going to come down to when we start adding users who are using our LSP services. We're going to want to make sure they have good experiences. And if we are able to see, our payments usually go through this node, that node, or they're usually going to this destination, we'll be able to tune our liquidity and make sure that it's in the right place for our users at that time.
Mm-hmm. And now you also mentioned there may be a difference between operating a routing node and operating an LSP. Can you speak to and kind of elaborate on the differences when it comes to what your channel profile might look like and how you manage liquidity?
Yeah, here's a really easy example. There are some, if you're on PlubNet, there are some nodes you connect to, and they just have really high demand. They're syncs, and you can look on Amboss, you can look at their fee profile, all the channels that are pointed towards that node. Usually they'll be pretty high fees. And you'll notice that if you open a channel towards that node and you're below that fee market, your channel gets exhausted really quickly. Now imagine you are trying to serve users that are probably trying to send their payments to that node. And if you were a routing node, you would probably set your fees just so you would maybe you'd undercut the average a little bit so you get traffic, but you wouldn't, lose out on too much fee revenue. For an LSP and for our LSP users, we want to protect that liquidity. We want to make sure it's there for our users. So payments that are coming in through channels that aren't our LSP users, maybe we're not so eager to cater towards the general market, but more thinking about, hey, how do we have a liquid channel that is in the direction our users are going to want to send? So that's the kind of thing where maybe your fees set a little different. Maybe you have a different kind of channel there, that sort of thing.
And do you guys have to worry at all about anonymity on the Lightning Network and privacy and like connecting to nodes that are, not either verified or not, financial institutions that are recognized? Like, I'd love to understand more about how, as an LSP, whether or not you're able to speak to all the different nodes on the network, or if you can only kind of access a subset of those nodes.
I think the beauty of Lightning is you are able to connect to who you want to. When you get on the Lightning Network, it's not like you are, being a node on the network doesn't mean you're a miner and you're dealing with everyone's transactions. Lightning is all about peer-to-peer connections. And for us with C equals, we're being, we're only connecting to people we want to connect to. And there are just some people we probably won't be able to connect to, but you can see, like on our Amboss profile, you can see who we're connected to now. And I think in general, there aren't a lot of nodes on the network that we wouldn't want to connect to yet, but in the future that might change.
Right. And now I want to talk a little bit about the distribution of the Lightning Network today, and how, you mentioned a couple times plebnet. There's a lot of kind of hobbyist node operators on the network today that are running relatively, smaller nodes. They're not as much capital, but they're quite knowledgeable about where they put their money, and they have some pretty interesting strategies for earning routing fees. What role do these hobbyist node operators play on the network over time with this like introduction of all these enterprise LSPs and routing nodes that we're seeing pop up?
Yeah, I think I told you I love plebnet. I'm a plebnet diehard, and I think the big thing is those are all people who understand Lightning really deeply, and they're all people who know where to put channels. And in general, a really good strategy as a small node is to put channels where liquidity is needed. So as we get more LSPs and more businesses connecting to Lightning, I just see those hobbyist node users as potentially a big help, especially if they're putting their channels in the right place. I think that as a hobby has a meaningful place in the Lightning Network.
Would it ever make sense for someone like Block with a lot of capital to deploy that with, in partnership with some of these hobbyists who are like really smart and really understand Lightning, but don't have 8,000 Bitcoin to drop on the network, right? Like, would it ever make sense to distribute Bitcoin in some kind of partnership that way? I don't know if that's even technically feasible or what the trade-offs would be, but I imagine there's some way to bring in this knowledge of plebnet in a way that doesn't require them to all have a ton of money, right? Like in a lot of other disciplines, in things you work on in life, there's a lot of people that don't have money but are really smart and they can excel. And so I wonder, like, how do we help those hobbyist node operators who may have this like world-class skill set and just don't have the capital to make the most of it necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to blow up my inbox or anything, but if you're a top node on the network and you think you know something about routing, hit me up and let's talk. I mean, as far as partnerships go, one thing we've thought about a lot is, hey, if we get really good about managing liquidity, is there some sort of open source tooling we can put out there? They were not telling you exactly what we're doing, but we're giving maybe some type of management tool that can help out. And actually, one of our first hires, I'm able to say this now, was ZMN SCPXJ, who actually did a lot of work as a protocol dev, and more recently was working on CL Boss, which was exactly that. It's a node management tool. Z-Man spent a lot of time with a lot of node runners, making that the best he could. And we're so happy to have him and have him. He's with me in the back room, and we're scribbling on whiteboards all the crazy ways that Liquidity can move around the network. So I think in the future, of course, we're connecting with people on PlebNet now, and if any of them want to reach out and talk to us about what we should do, or maybe we're doing something wrong, let us know. I'm all ears.
Are you able to share any of the ideas you guys have been brainstorming on, and ways in which Liquidity might move through the network, or how this node management tool might work in the context of C equals?
So we, I think, are going to have our own kind of specific liquidity needs, and it's kind of what I said before. I think we might be more in the business of making sure our liquidity is in the right place for our customers, as opposed to acting as a pure routing node. But yeah, I think eventually there could be something coming out from us where it's like, hey, here's the tooling we're using. Here's kind of how we're thinking about that.
Right. Okay, now I want to get into the future of the Lightning Network. What are some of the catalysts on the horizon that you see as really interesting and that you're following closely?
Yeah, I mean, Nostr is one of them. I am so excited about Nostr. I love that there's just zaps everywhere. And it's kind of the first place where I'm seeing a service that has integrated Lightning at its kind of native protocol level, which I think is really cool. I'd also be remiss to say, but us and our future partners, I think, kind of showing that an LSP can be a business is kind of a big thing, and that really unlocks liquidity for anyone else who is trying to do things on the Lightning Network. I think anyone we partner with will be able to get on the network faster, and they'll be able to send payments more reliably. So I'm excited about the people who have already reached out, the people who will reach out in the future about partnering with us and what we can help them do.
Nice. On the topic of Nostr, do you think Lightning will be more embedded in the Nostr protocol over time? Because it wasn't really, to begin with, it wasn't even a Bitcoin protocol, right? It's just Nostr, and Zaps were added in recently. That's kind of like it feels like to me that's like a first iteration of payments on Nostr, and it really closely resembles what you already see on things like Stacker News and on Fountain for podcasting 2.0, value for value. Like it inherits a lot of those same properties, but I wonder if it's just the first of many experiments in different ways. Lightning can be integrated. Are there any other ways in which you think Lightning could kind of embed itself in the Nostr protocol?
I think the really exciting thing about Nostr is that it's a lot of people who I think they were at least Bitcoiners or they were kind of around the Bitcoin community. And it's being developed with a lot of that ethos of decentralization is the future. And I think, even though it is early, the Lightning integration on Nostr is playing exactly to what I was saying before, is people who are interested in decentralizing their identity and decentralizing their media and their identity and how they are online. Lightning fits in really well with that. So I think there's a lot of excitement there, a lot of energy, and I'm excited to see how it goes further. But yeah, I think Lightning's probably still going to be a part of it as it goes.
Yeah. Now I know, one of the fundamental properties of Nostr is that you have this identity you can kind of carry around to all sorts of clients. And I know you guys at TBD are working on, you have DIDs and verifiable credentials. And I know you're kind of separate from that team a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, Nostr, the kind of identity system that is building there. It's got a lot of momentum, but it's maybe doesn't have all the pieces of the puzzle that something like DIDs has. I'd love to hear your kind of like lay of the land and how those systems are going to potentially interoperate or compete with each other over time.
I can't speak to exactly what Dan and Co are doing over there, but I think what I see when I see Nostr is a lot of excitement, and I see a very base execution of what decentralized identity could be. But you don't have the ability to roll keys. Key management is pretty tough. The persistence story is tough too. Like with Nostr, you're sending your messages off to relays and hoping that they're keeping their messages. And I think it does resemble a little bit the Fediverse. It's not exactly the same. You don't explicitly trust someone to hold your messages. But the fact that I can't hold my own messages and maybe rebroadcast them when a relay has decided to delete their history from 2 years ago is something that I think is a problem. And there are all sorts of problems that Web 5 is working through now. It's actually the decentralized web nodes, the way that decentralized identity and DIDs are used with the W3C spec. It's a lot of what they've thought through. So I'm looking forward to either Nostr picking up some of those features or DIDs bending towards Nostr. I think there is a lot of cool things that can happen there when Nostr gets built up a bit more and Web 5 kind of can play along with it.
Yeah. Do you think that we'll see some sort of service provider emerge in this, the comment you made about persistence on Nostr and maybe Relay decides to delete your messages over time? Is that an opportunity for, a Nostr service provider or someone to like, maybe it's just a paid relay to step in and offer, hey, you pay X amount of sats every month. We will somehow, manage to keep all your data in one place, ready for you to access whenever you want? Or is this going to be some kind of, do you think there's a case for like self-hosting all your data? Like, your tweets aren't really that, it doesn't require that much space. Can we store that on, something like an Umbrel or some kind of like node? Does that make sense?
Maybe. I mean, I could see myself maybe paying for a relay to hold my messages, but I host my own Lightning node. I host my own Bitcoin node. I would definitely host my own decentralized web node and keep all of my messages there as well. And I think could be a really natural place for Nostr to key in, at least on those ideas, or even into the ecosystem directly. I host my own photos. I have everything on. Actually, it's a server that's sitting right next to me right now. So I would love to see that ability come to Nostr, because owning your identity, of course, is important, but owning all of your data and owning all of like who you are online is important to me as well.
Do you think that's realistic to have everyone, host all of their own data? Because this is something I've tried to understand it, and I don't quite have a good understanding yet. But I think there's a pendulum swinging back and forth between centralization, decentralization. The cloud was this kind of like centralized hub for everyone to just pop in all their data, and maybe we're headed towards a shift in the pendulum where we go back to decentralized. Everyone kind of has it running on their own computer or on a Raspberry Pi. But I have a hard time believing that happens. I don't know why. It's hard for me to understand how we get billions of people who have now been trained. One click, your photo just disappears. It's on someone's server somewhere. How do we, create a change in their mind to help them understand, that taking control of your own data is important?
I think there's two things here. The first thing is that, of course, I don't think everyone is going to want to pony up the money and time to host everything like I do. And that's where, you were talking about a service as a paid relay on Nostr. Within the Web 5 ecosystem, there will definitely be a service to host decentralized web nodes. So it's sort of shifting the mindset from, instead of paying all of the companies I interact with on the internet with my data and my attention and everything about me, I pay maybe this person a monthly fee and they hold my data all for me in an encrypted blobs that they can't see, and I get the peace of mind of knowing that my entire everything about me isn't out there on the internet. I think the other thing to think about is this whole idea of self-hosting and making it easy and making it something that's a real elegant user experience is something that, again, people who are really focused on user experience have only just started to look at. I think a lot of engineers and people who know about what holding all your data looks like is actually like. They think I'm in the command line. I'm typing a lot of commands. I'm, cloning a Git repository and building a program from scratch, and they think about what the DevOps side of running a server is like. But I don't think we've really seen a product yet that makes it really simple to do all that yourself with like one click. I think the Umbrel folks have taken a really good stab at it, but it's still not an area where I think a lot of people have spent a lot of time. And that's kind of what I'm excited about for the future.
One common theme in this discussion is the need for better UX. I've heard it a couple times from you, and I'm curious to know about how we get more designers and people who understand UX to come into Bitcoin and help improve some of these user interaction problems, because they certainly exist. I mean, I struggle with them, and I'm embedded in this ecosystem every day. I can only imagine what someone who doesn't know anything about Bitcoin will face when they are met with all the different possibilities of ways they can move their money and store their funds on Bitcoin, on Lightning. How do we get more people to consider these challenges and build better solutions?
I think the Bitcoin design community is a good place for any designers who want to get into Bitcoin to start. And I also think as we see adoption grow, and as more people are trying to accept Lightning payments, or more people are trying to get into Bitcoin in general, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for companies that maybe aren't just like a bunch of Bitcoiners trying to make a Bitcoin thing happen, but more like a bunch of people who have a really good business idea and they want Bitcoin to be a part of it. I think it's kind of something that you have to commit yourself to from the start. And it's not easy. I think it's something that us as engineers, we can easily overlook and say, oh, they can just read the manual or use the CLI. But it's a big problem, and it's a different skill, but I think we can easily lose sight of how much work it takes to make something that is really usable for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this was an awesome conversation. I want to finish off with something I do at the end of every show. It's called the lightning round. I got a few rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a lightning powered platform for generating high quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. Okay, what is one book that has changed your view of the world?
Oh man, this is pretty basic, but it's Atlas Shrugged.
Okay, I like it. If you could change one thing about the Lightning Network, what would you change?
I'd add Bolt 12.
Interesting. Do you on the topic of Bolt 12? I know this is rapid fire round, but I have to ask. What's the status of that, and what are the challenges in getting a Bolt 12 to be fully implemented?
The Spiral team is really working hard on Bolt 12, which I'm excited about. It's really convincing a lot of people who are working on developing different node implementations to all see it as a priority, because everyone across LND, Eclair, LDK, CLN, they all have different things they're working on, and Bolt 12 is kind of a big undertaking. But I think there's a lot of progress now, and I think it's going to be good.
Cool. If you could only hold one asset for the next decade and it could not be Bitcoin, what asset would it be?
Gold.
Interesting. And then finally, who is one person in the Bitcoin or Lightning community that you'd like to give a shout out to for doing great work?
I actually was just talking to her recently, Lisa Nigut. So she's taken some time off from Core Lightning, but especially I've been talking to Z-Man, who was working on Core Lightning before. Whenever we talk about things like liquidity ads or dual funded channel opens, all of these things, when I look up those pull requests, Lisa's name is on all of those pull requests. So I actually told her this recently. I was like, I feel like you deserve more appreciation for what you've done.
Yeah, for sure. Lisa was on one of the episodes in the past, and one of the best teachers of Lightning too. She really has a good understanding of it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time today. This was a ton of fun. Where can listeners go to learn more about you and C equals?
They can go to cequals.xyz. You can follow me on Nostr. Maybe I'll send you my NPub, Kevin. You can put it
Sure.
on there.
Sounds great. And yeah, thank you again for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
Thanks, Kevin.
In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 62,213 sats. I just recorded an episode about a day or two ago, so the numbers haven't changed a whole lot since then. But I believe we have a couple of new comments. Yes, we do. First up, we have Mere Mortals Podcast, who says, Oscar is a legend. Fountain is close to my top used app. Really encouraged to see all the progress that has been made since your first episode. Congrats on episode 100. Thank you to the Mere Mortals Podcast. We also had VinDARD sent in 10,000 sats and said, Go Andrew. That is on episode 101, which is my latest release from just a day or two ago. That's Andrew Begin at Galoy. If you have not checked that one out, definitely give it a listen. Can't wait to see what you guys send in this week, and I'll talk to you soon.